Welcome to Our Girl Relationships. On this channel, we discuss day-to-day problems people face in their lives. Let's start with the video.
Though I'm salty and biased, I can honestly say that my fiance and his girlfriend had the closest version humanly possible to a true love story. Many years ago, and a few months prior to our first meeting in the beginning of our relationship, my fiance had been dating his childhood best friend and had only ended his relationship with her in the most dramatic and problematic way, in a story that made it impossible for me to accept his request to invite her to our wedding. Basically, their relationship didn't end because they realized they weren't right for each other, nor did it end because neither of my in-laws nor the girl's parents approved of the relationship. It was very obviously toxic and they were far too dependent on one another, and it was indisputable that eventually they would lead to the demise of their careers and possibly their lives. They were providing substances and alcohol for one another and lying about it to the gods to cover it up for each other. That's not the reason why the relationship ended, though. Things have been a lot easier to handle had it been about what they did as teenagers and what they must have obviously grown out of. If I could speak without bias or being blindsided by the hurt and trauma that I've gotten from these events, I would say that my fiance and his ex are the perfect example of right persons but wrong timing, which makes the story even worse actually, because even after it cost me my marriage and my husband his family, they still didn't get together and managed to ruin the remainder of the time they got to spend together. Back to the reason to got separated before him and I met. His ex-girlfriend had woken him up one day to inform him that she was pregnant and expecting and was aware of her pregnancy for the past few weeks. Not only was she hiding it from him, but she was denying it herself, and not for the noble and supreme reasons you may think, but because as teenagers and basically children, she was terrified of telling her parents. She kept her pregnancy from her then boyfriend, so that he wouldn't tell his parents that happened to be friends with her parents, so her parents wouldn't know. Just goes to show how stupid the thought processes teenagers have and how they interpret things. She wasn't taking into consideration the fact that every week she delayed could be the one that could mean that she would no longer get to terminate the pregnancy, nor keep the normal, stable, relatively happy life they had. She was far too consumed by concerns of being grounded and scolded, not the human being growing inside of her. There were obviously many other concerns that the parents were taking into consideration when they decided to disapprove of the relationship in the first place. One of those was how the possibility of it ending was going to influence the closeness between my parents' family and the ex-girlfriend's family. They were really close and had been that way for over a couple of decades, and this relationship was threatening to throw that bond under the bus overnight. I guess their concerns did end up manifesting in a way that not only gravely influenced the bond's quality, but eventually ended our relationship and soon-to-be marriage altogether. When my husband and I started progressing in organizing our wedding and making sure everything is perfectly set to go smoothly, we first tackled the invite list before we proceeded everything else. Anyone that has partaken in organizing a wedding would know how essential it was that you know exactly how many people would be attending. We listed off a couple of immediate families and obviously our closest friends and best friends before we got to the extended family members or family friends and so on. The fiancé of the year brought up his ex-girlfriend's parents, and my guards were immediately up because I knew exactly what he would be suggesting next. I shut down the idea of inviting his ex-girlfriend that he had only broken up with her because she got knocked up and neither of their parents approved of their relationship, for reasons that I don't even have to explain because it's supposed to be common sense that I would feel threatened by her presence on what should be the most important day of my life, and certainly the most important in our relationship. We had a huge argument about it and actually ended up causing the postponement of that process to the following week because I couldn't even stand to look at him while he acted so clueless as to why I was enraged. We settled on the idea of inviting the parents because they were so close to my in-laws and we didn't want to make them feel left out or that they didn't matter to us because even I genuinely consider them to be family. Things seemed to be going perfectly with the preparation after that, and we had actually decided on inviting as many people in person as we could, on top of obviously sending them an email and a personalized invite letter. All of these extra details were my doing because I genuinely dreamt about my wedding day for as long as I've known what marriage was, which is basically my entire life. The following family reunion, in which we knew that pretty much everybody we know would be invited, we thought it would be the perfect opportunity to verbally invite and let everyone know when they should be expecting the physical and virtual ones. As my husband and I scattered around the house and split in an attempt to maximize efficiency, I could see him talking to the ex-girlfriend's parents and could literally feel an anxiety growing in the pit of my stomach when their conversation took longer than most of other conversations. I tried brushing it off by assuming it was due to their closeness compared to most people for both of us, and he was probably being extra picky and cautious and polite. That is, of course, until I heard him speak out her name. I could lip read him saying that many times throughout. In the heat of the moment, I couldn't decide on what I should do and if I should go to strangle him in front of everyone, but I surely let him talk to them and picked the worst fight of our entire relationship with the moment we got home. I was already starting to question the sincerity of his feelings towards me and whether our marriage would be working out before we were even married, and over some chick from his past. Usually, these kinds of arguments are never a sign of a future good that's destined to come, at least not in my experience. I told my in-laws that he had invited her. They didn't spare him the scolding or the arguing, because they knew that by doing this, he would be throwing away a good portion of the quality of a date that's supposed to be about me and him and nobody else. His sisters and brothers that are known to be the ones that could hide a body for him didn't even side or try to excuse him going behind my back to invite her specifically. She obviously showed up to our wedding looking as best as she could, and I could have strangled my husband had he been next to me when I saw her. I was genuinely jealous of her because she looked drop dead gorgeous, and I hated that her relationship with my husband and its nature made me feel jealous instead of the usual urge to compliment her and make someone smile and feel happy. The intensity of those emotions of pure jealousy and hatred that contradicted every atom of my being were so profound that I will never forget how hard I had to bite my teeth to not say anything toxic or deprecating to the poor lady. At that, I thought she was a poor lady. Now I'd sucker punch her in a heartbeat. The wedding ceremony was over and my brother got up to toast and say the speech that he had been preparing for months. I noticed from the corner of my eyes that she was fidgeting around and nervous like she was going to speak next. Needless to add, she wasn't supposed to. She clanked her glass the moment my brother sat down, and my worst fears had come to life. She started speaking. She complimented the way I looked and said that she supported our relationship and didn't think the high school version of my husband would grow up to be the family man he has become. When she started mentioning him, starting a family and high school years and emotional bonds, one could only guess what comes next. Which started full-on bawling in the middle of our wedding ceremony, and my dumbass husband let go of my hand and rushed to her side to hug and comfort her, before this dumb shits starts crying with her, bawling his eyes out in front of everyone. Not only was I embarrassed to my core, but I immediately called off the wedding and I ran to spend the following weeks at a hotel. I'll be damned if I marry the same man that embarrassed me in front of every single person I love and love to heart. I wasn't even disturbed by the fact that my marriage was over because of how mad I was. I was just humiliated. There are many other reasons as to why I decided to end the marriage, but the emotions that rushed through me, that they were all of anxiety and sadness and jealousy, and none of them were what a bride is supposed to feel on her wedding day. And I blamed him for that, and I resent him for ending our marriage, and I will do so till the day I die. Not the a-hole. Sorry, but your wedding had it coming from the moment your husband went behind your back to invite his ex-girlfriend that you specifically requested him not to. I'm really sorry, but your emotions are hard, but you're definitely not the a-hole. Not the a-hole, you were against it. The family was against it. Maybe even the girl was against it. The only person who wanted her to be at the wedding was your husband, and I wouldn't be surprised if he had done so strategically to not get married to you. Seems crappy enough to do it, so I wouldn't really be surprised. Not the a-hole. There are situations where things happen that just don't feel like they make sense at the time, but turn out to have happened for the best, and they derail something worse from happening. And I think this is just one of those situations, because your marriage would have been a failed one had you gotten married and this not happened on your wedding day. He obviously doesn't deserve you and hasn't gotten over his ex one bit. That kind of means the marriage was doomed before it even started. Next story. My family used to like my wife when we first started dating, but they started antagonizing her once I proposed. All of my siblings and my mother are very insulting towards her. My dad doesn't care and stays neutral on the matter. My mom had my wife cry on the day of our wedding because she called her the morning of that. She should watch out and never hurt me because I'm her baby boy and she won't let any female hurt me. She also told my wife that she must be happy she's taking me away. I told my mom off for her behavior and told her that I won't accept that anymore, and if she repeats, I'll go no contact. Which I obviously shouldn't say because going no contact with family is harder than it sounds. My mom apologized to my wife after the wedding and said she'd try to make it up. I saw my mom genuinely trying, but my wife wasn't interested in making up with my mom completely and simply said she'd have a typical relationship with my family out of respect for me and the fact that they're my parents and siblings. Few months later, whenever I made plans with my wife, my mom, my two brothers, and my sister would always complain to me about said plans and try to get me to cancel them. Those plans would include trying to have a baby, going on vacation, getting a pet, and so on. Never heard of any of that, of course, and made my own choices with my wife. My siblings have told me that they start despising my wife and how she has a negative impact on me because she stole me from my family. I texted my siblings in the group chat we have that I want to be left alone, and that resulted in my sister and one brother calling me and cursing me out for making mom sad for my wife. My wife heard all of that. She said she doesn't feel comfortable around my family anymore, and she wanted to skip all the Christmas plans we had with them. I told her we can't do that, and that they're my family after all. She gave in and came to all of our Christmas plans. After every family gathering, my wife would be either mad or in tears because of how my siblings and mom would either ignore her or speak to her in a passive-aggressive way. After the New Year's Eve party we had with my family, we went home and she broke down in tears, saying she can't keep doing this anymore and that it's my fault for forcing her to come around these people when they treat her like that. This past week, we've not talked much because my wife has been going through it, but I'm thinking and wondering if I'm really the a-hole here for insisting she spend some time with my family. You're the a-hole, and don't act surprised when your wife drops divorce papers on the table. What your mother did on your wedding day was absolutely disgraceful, and you should count your stars she went through with the wedding because I, and I'm sure many other women, wouldn't have. You should show your wife you're thankful for her making the effort over Christmas to spend time with people who make her life a misery. You're basically telling and showing your wife that your family comes before her no matter how much they abuse her. You're the a-hole. Stop saying that you're in the middle ground when all you did is take care of your family's feelings and ignored your wife's. You were never the middle ground because you allowed her to get hurt all the time. Stop saying that's who they are, they're toxic, and continue to gaslight how your wife feels about them. You're the toxic one that your wife needs to get rid of. The fact that you knew and yet still allow your family to do what they want towards your wife and insisted that she has accepted it because it's family. Family is a choice and doesn't have to be blood related. You're the a-hole. The moment you got married, she became your family. She's your number one. Everyone else is an extended family at that point. Whether you have a child or not, she is your priority from then on out. You're forcing her into situations that hurt and upset her in order to do what? Stop arguments from happening? To keep your extended family happy? You should be prioritizing her. You should be apologizing to her right now and not allowing her to be so upset for a week that she's barely talking to you. You may want to have a relationship with your family, but you don't need to be dragging her into it. I suggest in future you draw some boundaries with your family. Get your head on straight, grow a backbone, and if you absolutely must spend time with your family, then you go alone. If I was your wife, I'd be seriously reconsidering the marriage. I wouldn't want to remain married to someone who caused me distress on purpose. Next story. So just for some background context, my boyfriend, 23, and I, 20, recently moved into a new apartment back in December. I was very hesitant to move in with him as I'm a full-time college student, unemployed, and wasn't ready for the commitments of moving into my own place. His mother was putting him out, so it was mandatory for him to move, but not for me as I lived with my father expense-free. I relented eventually as our original agreement was that I'd pay 40/60. Then it somehow changed to 50/50. Just to note, I also solely pay for groceries and small things that are needed, utensils, dishes, paper towels, etc. Cook for both of us and clean nearly every day. I don't work as I'm a university student who has been fortunate enough to get help with my tuition from family and an old car accident settlement I received once I turned 18. All the money I have is from saving extra money or when I would work during summer break. My boyfriend works as a parking garage tenant where he sits in the office answering calls every now and then for $16 an hour 5 days a week. January rent was due on the 1st, and when I asked him about his half, he asked that I pay the entirety, $1,200, and he'll pay me his half once he goes to the bank. I reluctantly agreed as that wasn't our original agreement. Fast forward to a week after paying rent, I ask him about his half and he gets defensive, claiming that we both live here and that I'll get my money, and that he'll pay me my money and I won't have to pay anything ever again. He seemed genuinely infuriated and annoyed that I asked him about what was going on with the rent situation. I asked him calmly if he actually had it, as I figured he may not have the money, but he insisted he did and that he just needed to get it out of bank. I've never been one to press people about money, but my boyfriend has a history of borrowing money and never paying it back. Prior to this rent, he asked to borrow $600 back in September of last year and still has yet to pay it back. I'm starting to have issues with the fact that he hasn't made any effort to actually pay me my money. It's more so the principle rather than the actual money itself. However, according to him, I'm being an a-hole about it because if I really believed in us, I would trust that he will eventually pay me back. Again, I'm sure he will, but his lack of drive to do is what bothers me. Am I the a-hole for wanting my money back? Original poster, you're young. Take this as a lesson learned and move back in with your father. Ask for his help if you need extra money to break the lease. No 23-year-old needs to go to a bank for money. Money is accessible through a phone or a laptop, which I assume he has. He's either broke or not telling you, or is just manipulating you into paying so he doesn't have to. It's irrelevant either way. He's dishonest and needs consequences. Tell him you're going back to your father's, not the a-hole. Let me see if I have this straight. You're paying 50% of the bills and paying for 100% of the groceries and household needs, so you're already paying more than him. Plus, you're doing all of the cooking and cleaning, so you're already contributing more than him. Now he's going to have you pay all the rent when you're already paying more and doing everything to run this place. This is on top of being a university student, and he doesn't get why you're not okay with all this. Please understand that this situation will not improve, only spiral. Not the a-hole. Not the a-hole. Your boyfriend is in debt to you. If he has the money and all it takes to pay you back is for him to get off his ace and go to the bank, why hasn't he done it sooner? This could be considered red flag behavior. You should confront this issue now so it doesn't become a long-time issue of him splashing your savings.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me and began to speak. "There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only." "Absolutely right." His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. "I'm leaving." After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick, is something wrong?" Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike. What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.